Well, for more on the Numsa strike, we're now joined by Lucio Trentini, who's the CEO of the Steel and Engineering Industries Federation of Southern Africa, Seifsa. He joins us now via Zoom. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
It must be a very difficult time for employers because the employees are saying that they're feeling too much pain and you're not listening to them, and that's why they've downed their tools.
Yeah, look, it's been a tough year. In fact, it's been an extremely tough 2 years. Notwithstanding what COVID has done to our industry has been in the doldrums even before COVID. An industry that has been under siege from foreign competition, cheap steel imports, not that much government support and intervention. We could do with a lot more, and we thank government for having finally concluded the Steel Master Plan, which we want to roll out as quickly as possible. And last year was an extremely difficult period to conclude a round of negotiations that we are currently busy with this year that should have taken place last year. Last year, in the midst of a global pandemic, Labour and business agreed that we should postpone last year's negotiations to this year and essentially retain existing terms and conditions of employment that were in place as at the end of the last collective agreement. For members of our federation, those terms and conditions of employment, we would still argue, notwithstanding the increase that is on the table for this year and the next 2 years, are quite favourable. Terms and conditions in the metal industry over the years have resulted in a package of employment conditions that are, quite frankly, almost unparalleled in any other collective bargaining environment. We have, as things stand, an entry-level wage for labourers reaching 12,000 Rand per month for an entry-level labourer, which includes guaranteed social security benefits. The sorts of benefits that are being demanded are mostly already in place, like the 10 days paternity leave, the family responsibility leave provisions, and many other terms and conditions which you will find in the metal industry. We have on the table an offer of 4.4%, which we believe is fair, reasonable, and economically defendable, given the circumstances the sector finds itself. We've looked at the forecast that the South African Reserve Bank has made with regards to inflation, and we believe that 4.4 pips, the average inflation rate for this year, and linked to a guaranteed increase of above inflation for the next 2 years, we believe that is something that demands and requires some serious consideration. We understand that the offer on the table currently is not acceptable to Numsa and the other trade unions, and we are in the midst of a strike. And quite frankly, a strike in this sector at this point in time, where we are hemorrhaging job losses, is absolutely no one's best interests. Small and medium-sized employers are up against it. We've seen many job closures, companies going into business rescue, and a sector that 30 years ago used to employ 500,000 blue-collar workers. Today we're down to just over 200,000 blue-collar workers. And Seifsa, or the Seifsa-affiliated membership, employs 57% of that 200,000 blue-collar workers. And we have a responsibility to South Africa, to the industry, and to our sector to keep as many of those workers in jobs for the next 2 years at least, and into the future. Unfortunately, it's going to be a rough ride. Industrial action is never something that one welcomes. It is part of the collective bargaining ritual, and we know that the sooner we can get back to the negotiating table, the better for all concerned. And we have already reached out to our colleagues in the union movement, and in particular Numsa, and we will be meeting as soon as possible, because we know that the sooner we can find each other around the negotiating table, the sooner we can end the strike and bring workers back into our shop floors. Because as things stand, workers are standing outside of our factories on a no work, no pay basis, and companies are having to come to terms with a shop floor that is empty of workers and reducing production. In this climate, that's just not acceptable. And the metal and engineering sector is a strategic cog in the economy, and we are reliant, and sectors of the economy are reliant on us to be able to continue to supply the steel that keeps the wheels of this economy turning. Whether it's construction, motor, water, mining, and related sectors, when the metals and engineering sector, when that value chain is interrupted, everyone feels the contagion.
All right.
And the last thing we want to do.
Do you think that you will find each other, though? I mean, they are asking 8%, that's the minimum, 2% plus CPI going forward. You're saying 1% plus CPI, 0.5% this year. And you're offering 4%. You seem so far apart. Is there a middle ground? In other words, can you improve your offer, do you think?
We're offering 4.4, and there is absolutely an opportunity for both sides to find it within their mandates to make the necessary compromises on both sides of the table to cut a deal. And that's how negotiations are conducted. And in the spirit of good faith negotiations, notwithstanding the fact that we are in the midst of a strike and employers are having to deal with employers locking them out, we have to continue to do what is right for the sector. And we realize that we're not going to conclude a deal as things stand at 4.4%, and I'm sure that Numsa realizes they're not going to conclude a deal at 8%. So we need to find it within ourselves and put the interests of this industry and the interests of employers and employees before our positions, and make the right moves at the right time to structure a deal. So the short answer to your question is, we have no alternative. A deal must be found, and a deal will be found, because that's the way that collective bargaining has in this sector worked for many, many years. This is not the first time that we are going through this saga. The last time we had a strike was in 2014. And, we know the consequences of strike action in this sector. The consequences linger on for years and years, and that's something that we are very, very alive to and wanting to end as quickly as possible.
Is it possible that if this drags on, that some companies may be forced to close, and that might mean jobs lost?
Well, that has already happened. I mean, that has happened immediately during the hard lockdown that was imposed by the government in an attempt to curb the spread of the pandemic. And we have seen unprecedented company closures, particularly owner-managed businesses, family-owned businesses, SMEs, businesses that, quite frankly, don't have the deep pockets that larger companies have, that are able to sustain the sorts of challenges that we are confronted with on a daily basis. So companies will close, there's no doubt about that. We're down to just over 8,000 companies in the sector. And not too long ago, that number was a double-digit number, 10,000 plus companies. And, the flip side of that coin is that employees are losing their jobs. And this is not a sector that at the moment is creating jobs. And the government's economic recovery plan is all about creating jobs in this sector. Well, we're only going to create jobs in this sector if the entry-level rates into the sector are conducive and attractive enough for employers to take the risk and open companies in this sector. And as things stand, with a 4.4% offer on the table, as I've indicated, the entry-level wage rate for this sector is 12,500 Rand. If you compare that to the national minimum wage, that's 3 times the national minimum wage. So, we have our work cut out for us, but I'm convinced that as long as we're talking, there's always the aim to conclude a deal, because the alternative is just, quite frankly, too ghastly to consider. And the last thing that we want is a repeat of 2014. The 2014 saga resulted in unprecedented levels of violence and intimidation and destruction to property, which is a South African phenomenon. When we go out on strike and lock employees out, we have this nasty habit of hurting one another and destroying what is around us. Once again, that's something that we want to avoid. And just from an economic and business point of view, the strike in 2014, when the economy was much bigger and stronger and more resilient than it is today, costs the industry 300 million rand per day and the economy in the region of 6 billion rand in GDP. Now, those numbers are just unacceptable in today's environment and in today's economy. We need to build this economy, not break it down. And I have a long-standing relationship with Numsa and all the other trade unions. I've been in this job for a long time, and we have to find one another.
All right, Mr. Trentini, we're going to have to leave it there, but we certainly wish you the best in your negotiations so that you do find each other and save jobs and save businesses. Thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.